Bruno, you have supported many cities on their journey from what you call issues to outcomes, I believe. So do you see any common issues faced by cities worldwide, and what are these common issues? So how about you, what would you identify them as in 5 minutes?
Yes, thank you, Kishore. There's many issues, but let's try to segment and figure out what's common and give an idea of some of the common solutions. First of all, if you put yourself in the shoes of a city, what's coming out regularly is three themes. One is how to address the needs of the citizen, and it's really about change management, about the consumer behavior, about transportation habits, etc., etc. And with the political challenge, how democratically should we sort of touch these different sort of changes. The second issue cities are facing is the issue of scaling. There's many pilots everywhere, around the room, around the world, but how do you move from a pilot to actually a scale solution that is really transforming completely the way a city is addressing a specific issue? And the third one, you might have noticed in today's world, finance tends to be the problem everywhere, and cities are facing a big challenge in how to finance some of the required investments. Now, if we look at the issue specifically, there's two ways to look at issues. It's what cities are trying to address, and you have the classic topics around energy and water, which is one, particularly the question of network and the question of storage. Buildings, which are huge part of the energy consumption in the city, and also very important from a social standpoint. Mobility, which was addressed, or transportation more generally, and all that in an effort to create a more attractive environment. So let's say that's a what. The key issues that most cities are facing in a similar way. The first one is around policy. It was said in the scenario, the question of stability, particularly at a global or national level of policies. And today we can see that cities are sort of trying to take their independence through the C40 and to decide basically because government is incapable of providing a stable framework, let's figure out how we can progress on our own. Cities as organizations have many of the handicaps of corporations, sometimes worse, which is that they are very much sort of organized through vertical silos by department, which have difficulties to collaborate when the solution is very often across multiple departments. So there's a real sort of operating model challenge. I mentioned the financial constraints. I mentioned the fact that the technology is not something that is very familiar to a city administration in general, which they're struggling with in many domains. For example, when we start talking about mobility or grids. Another challenge everywhere is the point of value, which is value business case. How do you define the value that you're providing to the city or to the citizens? Typically, emissions are not necessarily monetizable. Some of the advantages you try to provide to the citizens have a cultural value or lifestyle value, not necessarily an economic value. So the whole problem of figuring out the global business case, that what you do, the investments you make, are actually sort of perceived to provide value to all the participants. And last point, which is very much a theme I heard all the time yesterday, it's an operating model point. It's the so-called public-private partnership, which is how do you actually sort of mobilize the enterprises and business to participate to the different solutions. Everyone recognizes that there is a need for that level of collaboration, but how to make that happen is a challenge. It's a challenge around public procurement. It's a challenge on how to mobilize innovation. It's a challenge around what level of competitive environment is needed to progress. It's a challenge around measurement and having sort of the right indicators. So that's typically part of the set of issues and problems that all cities are facing.
Thank you very much, Bruno, and thank you for sticking to 5 minutes. I must say, the next three responses should be fascinating, because we've asked Isher and Mauricio and Zhengyu to reflect from their own city's experience. So you may be from Delhi, from Buenos Aires, from Beijing. From your own city's experiences, how do you see cities responding to all these global urbanization trends and challenges? So we hope when we listen to 3 cities from 3 very different geographic locations, we might get a better idea of how the world is shaping up. So Ishar, 5 minutes.
India, as you know, has been a federal, democratic, independent nation for 65 years, but it was only 20 years ago that we had a constitutional amendment which formally recognized local government and recommended that state governments transfer certain municipal functions to cities, and similarly for rural areas. So we are really talking of a 20-year period in which, in a democracy, in a country with rising incomes, younger population, aspirations are rising, and demand for public service delivery is very loud and strong. And how are the cities in India responding to that? Basically, what we have is a situation where the mandate is with local governments, but these mandates are unfunded because the financial devolution has not been spelt out. So, what we find in India is not just the experience of one city. We find in India the diversity of experience of how in certain state governments which have provided an enabling environment for cities to respond, where there has been leadership, where there are reforms, it has been easy to get finance, either directly by the state government helping cities to invest or through public-private partnership. One challenge is that of capacity building, because this is a new area and you need to invest in capacity for urban planning, for urban management, and issues like that. What I would like to draw your attention to is a monthly column that I write in the Indian Express and the Financial Express, which will give you, at least by now, 30 cases of urban transformation of very different kinds, whether it is in the sector of water, sewerage, urban transport, urban roads. And let me just highlight 3 quick examples. One, we keep talking of finance, how you can actually invest in urban roads and unlock land value by charging a levy to all those whose value of land has really increased. The Hyderabad Outer Ring Road is an extremely good example of how the municipal corporation has unlocked land value to further invest in infrastructure. Second, the role of technology. India's IT sector has improved the balance sheets world over. Now, this IT is turning to help e-governance in India. Whether you look at public service delivery in cities like Bangalore, Hyderabad, Surat, or you look at GIS application to assess property values and improve realization through property taxes, a very innovative use of GIS has been in improving road safety in Tamil Nadu. But all of this IT innovations have to be backed up with business process re-engineering on the administrative reform side. And this is actually happening in India. One final thing, and I will stop. The example of a small town called Alandur outside of Chennai, which in the year 2000 had no underground sewerage. By mobilizing public deposits and turning down a World Bank loan, which was available at 16% interest rate, and the condition was that you have to mobilize some resources through deposits. The dynamic mayor of the city was able to raise 90% of the resources through public deposits. The state government stepped in and gave the rest. And he said, thank you to the World Bank for a great idea. And the public actually owned the project. And within 4 years, Alandur got 100% underground sewerage. So there is a lot that is happening. There is a lot more that needs to happen. And that is the challenge and the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, two things. One, we will all read your columns. And two, we will all turn down World Bank loans from now on. Mauricio.
Thank you, Professor. Well, I want to bring back a point that was raised by Bruno and Konrad. Cities effectively are closer to the damages that climate change are doing. And we are closer to quick answers, efficient solutions. That's why we need that the World Bank, and we are arguing with the World Bank through C40, that should work directly, focus directly the effort with the cities, not through the countries. Because the countries have different priorities. And we have a clear agenda. We are all working in recycling garbage, new technologies to treat the garbage, new efficient, clean technologies to produce energy, increasing parks. We are working in mobility plans. So there are many, many things that are going on, and we can go faster because we have a lack of resources. But out of all that menu, I would like to focus in one part, no? That is related with my first intervention, is working in the public space. This is what defines a more humanized city. We have to recover the human scale. No? We have to end up with the pedestrians against the wall in small sidewalks because the strong cars are coming, the owners of the city. No? It's that, in that city, there's no future. It's more violence, more contamination. And we had launched a program that every month we are increasing the number of streets that are changing to be pedestrian streets. I have so many critics about that. Obviously, from all the ones that are coming into the city with the cars, no? But the results are incredible, incredible. You can't believe how you recover a different style of life, no? With the good things of the past and the good things of the present. People exchanging in now huge sidewalks. Not anymore cars can go through. No traffic can go through in squares of 4 blocks and 4 blocks. And we are advancing in that direction, so in a couple of years, no cars will go through the center of the city. And you can't believe how things change. And another aspect that can measure that is that properties have raised 30% in the areas that we have changed to pedestrian streets. So that's the move I think that many cities around the world are taking. And I think that through that way, we can connect with a different type of society, a different type of harmony in terms of exchange, and towards less contamination, less violence, more humanized interchange.
Thank you very much, Mauricio.
And in addition to that, sorry, Professor, those spaces get more safety. They are more safe, more human. Walking around the street, more safe it is. So it solves another problem in these big cities that, as Konrad said, are receiving day by day more and more people, more immigration, and sometimes that means violence. And in this way, you are working, also solving that problem.
Yeah, thank you very much. Since you mentioned that you're trying to recover public space by expanding sidewalks and eventually even restricting the entry of cars into cities, I wonder whether Beijing is interested sometime in also preventing cars from coming into the center of Beijing. That would be a big shock politically. But Mr. Zhou, what's your perspective from Beijing's point of view?
Yes. In Beijing, in Beijing, the traffic conditions are such that we had to roll out many measures. In general, basically we're trying to build more as well as to push out the limitations necessary. We are trying to build more more train lines, more subway lines. We have about 372 kilometers of subway lines, and we're trying to build about 100 kilometers more. And in next 5 years, we could reach about 500 kilometers. We also have a 1,000 kilometer target in our city, hoping to achieve it in phases gradually. We're also trying to regulate this area of work. We have rolled out regulation measures, especially in terms of parking. We are trying to do more work in this area. We have about 5 million big cars at the moment, but we only have 2.5 million parking lots for such cars. So we are trying to do more for that. In terms of restrictions, we are using the balloting system to give out 20,000 rights to purchase cars. And in terms of our second ring road, and within that, we don't actually have any restrictions at the moment or any plans to restrict entry of cars into this downtown area in the moment. So currently we're trying to work with Singapore or learn from Singapore in this area, because in Singapore they have this system where you purchase or bid for the right to buy a car, and the highest bidder wins. And they are also using the ERP system to collect charges from drivers who drive into the downtown area. So we're trying to work with Singapore and other countries to learn from the experiences. In terms of population, I think we still have a very big challenge here. We have about 21 million people in Beijing. And in urbanization, we know that demography is something that we must look at. In Beijing, our rural folk numbered about 420 million. But last year was about 2.64 million, which means that many of them, about 40% of them, have moved to the cities or have been urbanized. Now, this urbanization rate is about 80% in Beijing, but in Shanghai it's about 85%. So it's higher in Shanghai. Now I was talking about rural folk within the Beijing borders, but then we also have migrants from rural areas in other cities and other provinces. We have about 7 million immigrants in Beijing. So Beijing also has many things to think about in urbanization. That is, how to control the continued growth of big cities. That's something that Beijing has to think about. And with regard to our local rural immigrants, how are we going to house them? How are we going to urbanize them? We are trying to go through reform of rural areas, improve their housing, and also build housing for them, and allocate land resources so that we can build some integrated industries, and this can give them an urban way of life and also build new opportunities for employment and industry for the local communities. So that would also solve one aspect of the social problems. And it will also help to relieve congestion in the big cities. And that's something we're trying to look at. As at this point, I think we have made some progress in this area. As for immigration from the outside, we are trying to get around the problem by working on the housing aspect. That is, using housing policies to mitigate this immigration issue. we're trying to achieve an overall balance, which is to prevent too much concentration in the city areas. Thank you very much.